The crisp morning air usually invigorated Ilara, but today it only amplified the dull ache behind her eyes. Sunlight, normally a welcome guest, felt like an interrogation lamp as it streamed through the display window of Ilara's petals. Dust motes danced in its beams, mocking the meager sales ledger tucked beneath the counter. She'd spent the dawn coaxing wilting lilies back to life with a precise blend of nutrient solution and whispered encouragement, a ritual she now performed with a growing sense of futility. The mail slot clattered, a sound that had come to symbolize dread. Ilara approached the door with the reluctance of a condemned woman, her fingers trembling slightly as she gathered the thin stack. Most of it, as expected, was a familiar gallery of red ink, overdue notices, final warnings, threats disguised as polite inquiries from the bank. Her stomach churned. The shop, her dream, was slowly being choked by a tangle of unpaid bills, much like an aggressive vine strangling a delicate rose. Then, at the bottom of the pile, a stark contrast to the utilitarian envelopes, lay a thick cream-colored missive. It was sealed with a disc of deep gold wax, embossed with an intricate, unidentifiable crest. No return address, no sender's name, just her own name, Elara Vance, meticulously penned in elegant script. A shiver, not entirely of cold, traced its way down her spine. Such formality usually heralded either good news of a significant, life-altering kind, or bad news of an equally profound nature. Given her current luck, she braced herself for the latter. She tore the seal with a fingernail, the crackle of breaking wax echoing unnaturally loud in the quiet shop. The paper inside was thick, expensive, smelling faintly of parchment and old cedar. Her eyes scanned the opening lines, then darted back, rereading. It is with sincere regret that we inform you of the passing of Maeve Vance, your great-aunt, on October 12th. The words blurred for a moment. Maeve, great-aunt Maeve. A distant, enigmatic figure Ilara barely remembered. Her mind conjured only fleeting images, a pair of kind, knowing eyes, the scent of earth and herbs, a whispered tale about the moon. Maeve had lived alone, far out in the countryside, on a property everyone vaguely referred to as Bramblewood. A place whispered about more than visited, known for its isolation and the eccentricities of its sole inhabitant. Ilara continued reading, a growing sense of unease coiling in her gut. The firm of Blackwood and Sons solicitors detailed the provisions of Maeve's last will and testament. And then, the paragraph that knocked the breath from her lungs. And by the terms of her will, Great-aunt Maeve Vance hereby bequeaths to you, Elara Vance, the entirety of her estate, including the property known as Bramblewood Farm, located at 17 Willow Creek Lane, and all its contents. The letter slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the worn wooden floorboards. Bramblewood, inherited. The notorious Bramblewood, a place synonymous with neglect and disrepair. A place the local gossips claimed was more ruin than farm, with collapsing outbuildings and fields choked by weeds. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. Here she was, drowning in debt, struggling to keep a few hundred square feet of floral beauty alive, and she just inherited a colossal burden, a failing farm, a bottomless pit of structural deficiencies and overgrown wilderness. A hysterical laugh bubbled up, threatening to escape. Bramblewood. It wasn't a gift, it was a millstone. The cost of renovating such a place would be astronomical, far beyond anything she could ever hope to scrape together. It was a property everyone believed was worthless, a place practically given away at a tax auction years ago, only for Maeve to somehow acquire it. She knelt, retrieving the letter, her fingers tracing the elegant script as if searching for a loophole, a hidden clause that would absolve her of this dubious legacy. There was none. It was hers, all of it. The crumbling farmhouse, the fields undoubtedly overrun with brambles, the whatever it was that constituted its contents. Her gaze drifted to the wilting roses in a vase on the counter, their petals beginning to brown at the edges despite her best efforts. Her small world felt like it was shrinking, suffocating under the weight of financial anxiety. And now, this. An albatross around her already aching neck. Maeve, what were you thinking? Alara wondered, her voice a whisper in the silent shop. Did you truly believe this was a gift? Or was it some final cryptic challenge from beyond the grave? The thought of inspecting Bramblewood filled her with a mixture of dread and a peculiar, almost morbid curiosity. What secrets did the old farm hold? What had Maeve been doing all those years, tucked away from the world? All Elara knew was that she now owned a problem far larger than any she'd ever encountered. A problem that threatened to completely overwhelm her already precarious existence. She had to find a way to make something, anything, out of this impossible inheritance. If not, she was truly lost. First glimpse of Bramblewood. The familiar city sprawl gave way to patchwork fields, then dense, brooding woodlands as Elara's ancient hatchback chugged further into the countryside. The hum of the engine was a monotonous backdrop to her churning thoughts. Each mile marker seemed to amplify the absurdity of her situation, trading the faint scent of wilting roses for the promise of, well, she wasn't entirely sure what. The air grew cooler, carrying the damp scent of earth and something vaguely metallic. She passed a dilapidated sign, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin, announcing, Willow Creek, population 783. Soon after, the road narrowed, becoming a gravel track that rattled her teeth and sent plumes of dust swirling in her rearview mirror. The first glimpse of Bramblewood was less a revelation and more a confirmation of every dire whisper. It wasn't just unkempt, it was actively decaying. The main house, once surely grand, now sagged like a tired old woman, its gabled roof a collection of missing shingles and splintered wood. Several windows gaped open, black holes against the faded clapboard, while others were boarded up haphazardly. The porch, once a welcoming feature, was a splintered, skeletal ruin. Weeds, thick and tenacious, had claimed the entirety of the front yard, forming an impenetrable green barrier that swallowed what might have once been a path. To the left, a barn leaned precariously, its rust-colored roof a patchwork of holes, one side bowing outwards as if exhausted from centuries of supporting its own weight. A skeletal windmill stood sentinel behind it, its blades long since gone, leaving only a gaunt frame against the bruised sky. Alara cut the engine, the sudden silence deafening after the continuous drone of the car. The air hung heavy with the smell of damp earth and decay, punctuated by the faint, distant caw of a crow. This wasn't a farm, it was a ghost, a monument to neglect. She squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, wishing she could unsee it, but the image was already seared into her mind. A polite cough shattered the stillness. Alara jumped, her hand flying to her chest. Standing by her driver's side window, as if he'd materialized from the dust itself, was a man in a perfectly tailored tweed jacket, a neatly folded handkerchief peeking from his breast pocket. His silver hair was meticulously combed, and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes played on his lips. "Miss Vance, I presume?" he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "Percival Finch, Finch Realty. I apologize for the intrusion, but I saw your vehicle approaching. Word travels fast in these parts, especially regarding a property such as Bramblewood." He extended a manicured hand, which Alara hesitantly shook. His grip was surprisingly firm. "Mr. Finch," Alara managed, her voice a little hoarse. I wasn't expecting anyone." "Of course not," he chuckled, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "But I've been keeping an eye on this particular parcel. Such a shame about your Aunt Maeve. A true character, that one." He gestured vaguely at the crumbling edifice. "Left quite the fixer-upper, didn't she?" Alara bristled slightly at his condescending tone. "It certainly has potential." Even as she said it, the words felt hollow, a desperate attempt to inject some shred of hope into the desolate scene. Mr. Finch's smile widened, revealing teeth that were just a little too perfect. "Potential? A florist's optimism, I suppose. Admirable. But let's be realistic, Miss Vance. This land is notoriously poor. Clay soil, practically infertile. And the well, as you'll soon discover, has been dry for years. Most of the structure is unsound, a demolition job waiting to happen. The cost of repair alone would be astronomical." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Which brings me to my point. I have a client, a quiet fellow, looking for a large plot of land, no matter how challenging. He's willing to take this considerable burden off your hands." He reached into his inner jacket pocket, pulling out a slim leather wallet. "He's authorized me to offer you—" He paused for dramatic effect, then named a sum so insultingly low it made Alara's stomach clench. It wouldn't even cover a fraction of her outstanding debts, let alone the funeral arrangements. "It's a fair price considering the circumstances," Mr. Finch added, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if daring her to challenge him. "A quick sale, no fuss, no further financial drain on your part. Think of it as cutting your losses before they become truly insurmountable." He clearly saw her as a desperate woman, easily swayed by the prospect of any cash at all. Alara looked from the decaying farm to Mr. Finch's expectant face. The smell of decay seemed to deepen, and the crow's caw sounded like a mocking laugh. This man was circling, a vulture sensing weakness. But as disheartening as Bramblewood was, something in her rebelled against his dismissive assessment, against the thought of letting this man, this slick opportunist, simply snatch it away. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Finch," Alara said, trying to inject more resolve into her voice than she felt. "But I think I'll be needing a little more time to assess the property myself." Mr. Finch's smile didn't falter, but a flicker of something colder, sharper, appeared in his eyes. "As you wish, Miss Vance. But time, as they say, is money. And in this case, I fear it will only reveal how much less Bramblewood is truly worth." He gave a short, curt nod, then turned and strode back to a gleaming black sedan parked a little further down the track, leaving Alara alone with the silent, crumbling testament to her inheritance. The afternoon's stifling heat did little to calm Alara's raw nerves. Finch's patronizing smirk remained a searing brand in her mind, a constant testament to her precarious finances. He clearly perceived her as desperate, ripe for exploitation, and to her chagrin, he wasn't entirely wrong. The florist shop, once her pride and joy, had become an anchor, its dwindling profits barely covering the avalanche of bills. This farm, a monument to neglect, as she'd privately named it, represented her last best hope. Not for riches, but for anything to stem the inevitable tide of losses. Her gaze swept across the sprawling, untamed acreage, past the skeletal remains of a forgotten orchard, over dense thickets of thorn bushes, finally settling on the barn. Its weathered timbers groaned under the burden of years, yet it stood firm. Crucially, it had a foundation, and foundations often concealed things. Old tools, forgotten machinery, perhaps even scrap metal. Every cent mattered. With a sigh that tasted of dust and resignation, Elara retrieved a shovel and thick gardening gloves from the bed of her battered pickup. The sun beat down, baking the earth into an obdurate crust. Pushing up the sleeves of her faded denim shirt, a practical gesture that exposed forearms already dusted with the day's grime, she watched the air shimmer above the cracked soil, distorting the distant tree line. She decided to begin near the barn, where a particularly aggressive knot of vines had colonized the ground, creeping up the aged wood like grasping tendrils. These were no delicate ivy shoots, but thick, woody ropes, their leaves a deep, almost bruised purple. They exuded an unnatural vigor, strangling everything in their path. "If I can clear this, maybe I can get a better look at the barn's foundation," she murmured, her voice swallowed by the vast stillness. The shovel bit into the dry earth with surprising resistance. The vine's roots, she discovered, were as tenacious as their above-ground counterparts, a dense, fibrous net that defied her every effort to dislodge it. Sweat beaded on her forehead, trickling down her temples, stinging her eyes. Each swing of the shovel was an act of defiance against the relentless heat and the overwhelming task ahead. After an hour of back-breaking labor, she'd only managed to expose a small patch of the cracked, sun-baked soil. The disturbed earth released a dry, earthy scent, tinged with something faintly metallic, like old rust. She paused, wiping her brow with the back of a gloved hand, her muscles protesting with dull aches. Her eyes scoured the small cleared area, searching for any glint of metal, any hint of value. Nothing but rocks and stubborn roots. Frustration gnawed at her, a familiar companion in recent months. She took a deep breath, attempting to quell the rising tide of despair. This was it, the rock bottom she dreaded. But then, a flicker of stubborn resolve ignited within her. She wouldn't surrender. Not yet. She plunged the shovel back into the earth, aiming for a particularly thick root that seemed to anchor a large portion of the purple vines. The metal edge scraped against something unyielding. Not a rock this time. The sound was different. A hollow resonance that vibrated up the shaft of the shovel and into her hands. It was a dull thud, distinct from the sharp clink of stone on metal, or the soft thunk of compacted earth. Curiosity, a rare sensation these days, pricked at her. She dug around the object, carefully scraping away the soil. The purple vines, it seemed, had woven themselves inextricably around it, their roots clinging stubbornly to its surface. As more earth fell away, she noticed a distinct, smooth texture, unlike the rough grain of rock or the porous nature of wood. It felt cool to the touch, even beneath the blazing sun. With renewed vigor, Elara excavated around the object. It was large, far larger than any rock she'd encountered, and appeared to be partially buried. The hollow sound repeated as she tapped it again with the shovel, a subtle echo hinting at an enclosed space. What was this? An old cistern? A forgotten septic tank? Or something else entirely? The possibility, however remote, of finding something truly unexpected, something more than mere scrap, spurred her on. The oppressive heat, the ache in her muscles, the weight of her debts, all receded slightly, replaced by a growing sense of intrigue. The stone slab's secret. The smooth, cool surface beneath Alara's fingertips offered a stark contrast to the rough soil and fibrous vines. It wasn't a rock, not in the typical sense. The subtle curve she'd felt earlier gave way to a distinct, flat plane. A jolt of something akin to curiosity, a sensation she hadn't truly felt in months, momentarily dislodged the heavy weight of her financial woes. This wasn't just a random boulder. It felt placed. She set aside her shovel, opting for the smaller hand trowel, and began to meticulously scrape away the clinging earth. The purple vines, so tenacious just moments ago, seemed to recoil from the object, their tendrils thinner and less aggressive near its perimeter. As more soil gave way, the flat surface expanded, revealing clean, straight edges. This wasn't natural. It was carved. Minutes stretched into an hour, her movements precise and deliberate. Dust clung to her eyelashes, and the scent of damp earth filled her nostrils. Slowly, painstakingly, the full outline of a rectangular slab emerged. It was surprisingly large, perhaps 5 feet by 3, and appeared to be made of a dark, almost black stone, its surface surprisingly unblemished despite being buried for what felt like ages. Intricate, swirling patterns, barely discernible beneath a film of grime, decorated its borders. They looked like stylized leaves, perhaps, or currents of water. A faint hum, a vibration more felt than heard, seemed to emanate from its core, a subtle resonance against her palm when she pressed it flat. "What in the blazes are you?" she murmured, her voice hoarse. The weight of the slab was immense, even without trying to lift it. She walked its perimeter, confirming it was indeed a single unbroken piece. There was no visible seam, no handle, just the smooth, dark stone. Her initial thought was to dig deeper around its sides, to see if it was merely a capstone for something larger. But as she cleared the last of the soil, revealing the bottom edge, she saw it. A faint, almost invisible line running along one side, a hairline fracture in the stone that suggested a hinge. And on the opposite side, a shallow indentation, perfectly circular, about the size of her fist. A lever. She needed a lever. Alara trudged back to the shed, her mind racing. The overwhelming anxiety about Finch and the shop still gnawed at her, but this discovery had injected a strange, almost obsessive focus into her day. She rummaged through the dusty tools, bypassing the usual gardening implements. Her great-aunt Maeve, practical and resourceful, had kept a small collection of construction tools: a rusty crowbar, a pickaxe, a sledgehammer. The crowbar felt right. Returning to the slab, Elora knelt, carefully examining the circular indentation. It wasn't just a divot. It was a shallow depression designed to receive something. She positioned the flattened end of the crowbar into the indent, bracing her feet, and took a deep breath. Her muscles, already protesting from hours of digging, tensed. She pushed. Nothing. The slab remained stubbornly inert. Frustration simmered, quickly threatening to extinguish the flicker of excitement. This was just another dead end, another monumental effort for no reward. The familiar despair began to creep back in. But then she remembered Maeve's stubbornness, her refusal to give up. Alara took another breath, repositioned her hands, and pushed again, putting all her weight into it. gritting her teeth against the strain. This time, there was a groan, not from her, but from the stone. A low grinding sound, deep and resonant, that vibrated through the earth. A thin crack appeared along the hinged side of the slab, widening almost imperceptibly. A rush of cool, earthy air, thick with the scent of ancient dust and something metallic, wafted up. Hope surged, adrenaline sharpening her focus. She continued to apply pressure, slowly, steadily. The groaning intensified, a chorus of stone protesting its long slumber. Inch by agonizing inch, the slab began to tilt upwards. Sunlight, previously bathing the dark stone, now plunged into the emerging gap, revealing a profound darkness beneath. Finally, with a soft thud as the opposite edge settled against the disturbed earth, the slab was open. A rectangular maw, roughly 4 feet by 2, stared back at her. It wasn't a cavity or a shallow pit. It was a tunnel, dark, narrow, and leading straight down into the earth. The air that now flowed freely from it was distinctly cooler than the outside, carrying a faint, musty aroma that prickled at the back of her throat. Alara peered into the inky blackness. No light penetrated its depths. No sound emerged. Just the profound, silent invitation of the unknown. A shiver, not entirely from the cold air, traced a path down her spine. The old barn, the farm, the seemingly worthless land, none of it felt the same now. The world, her world, had just taken an unexpected, terrifying turn. This wasn't just about saving the shop anymore. This was about something far larger, far more significant, hidden beneath Maeve's neglected farm. She gripped the crowbar, its cold metal a stark anchor to reality. The darkness beckoned, a silent promise of secrets untold. And in that moment, despite the apprehension coiling in her guts, Elara knew she had to go in, descend into the unknown. The air above the open slab thinned, suddenly insufficient. Elara teetered at the chasm's edge, the tunnel's gaping maw pulling her inward with a silent, insistent hum. Fear, a cold knot, wrestled with surging curiosity. This was no mere hole. It was an invitation, a challenge, a secret whispering her name. She recoiled, her gaze still fastened on the darkness, stumbling toward the old barn. Inside, cobweb-draped shelves held Maeve's forgotten relics. Her fingers brushed a rusted trowel, a stiff coil of rope, before landing on the solid, metallic heft of a storm lantern. A surprising flicker of hope ignited as she located a kerosene can on a dusty workbench. Her hands, usually deft with delicate petals and sharp shears, fumbled with the lantern's cap, the fuel's pungent scent stinging her nostrils as she carefully poured. A box of ancient matches yielded 3 brittle heads before one sparked, sputtering to life. The wick caught, blossoming into a steady golden glow, pushing back the barn's encroaching shadows. Clutching the lantern, its warmth a small comfort against the seeping chill, Elara returned. The robust light, however, seemed swallowed by the tunnel's depths, illuminating only the first few steps of a rough-hewn stone staircase that spiraled downward. A cool, damp breath rose from below, carrying the earthy tang of wet rock and something else, ancient, undefinable. She took a deep, shuddering breath, kerosene now mingling with primordial dampness. "Okay, Elara," she whispered, her voice a reedy tremor in the vast silence. "Just one step at a time." She lowered the lantern, letting its beam probe the void, then carefully placed her foot on the uppermost step. The stone was cold and slick beneath her worn boot. Gripping the rough wall, her fingers finding purchase on the uneven surface, she began her descent. Each step was deliberate, a silent negotiation with the darkness. The spiral tightened unexpectedly, walls closing in, creating an intimate, almost suffocating passage. Her own breathing seemed amplified, a ragged counterpoint to the soft scrape of her boots. The lantern light danced, casting grotesque, elongated shadows that flickered and swayed, making static stones seem alive. She imagined eyes watching from deeper recesses, ancient guardians roused by her intrusion. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. But with each downward turn, awe grew, slowly eclipsing the raw terror. This wasn't just a hole. It was a testament to unimaginable effort, a secret passage carved by hands long turned to dust. Who had built this? And why? Minutes stretched into eternity. The descent felt endless, the air growing heavier, denser, as if the very weight of the earth pressed down. The temperature plummeted, a profound chill seeping into her marrow despite the lantern's warmth. She wondered if she was losing her mind, if the farm's stress, her debts, had finally pushed her into a delusion of buried passages. Yet, the cold, hard stone beneath her hands, the persistent dampness, the distinct scent of earth and time were undeniably real. Then, just as her legs threatened to give out from the endless spiral, the passage opened. Steps terminated abruptly onto a flat, circular floor. Elara raised the lantern, its beam sweeping across a small, perfectly round chamber, perhaps 10 feet in diameter. The walls, dark stone like the tunnel, were smoother here, almost polished, interlocking with masterful precision. No visible seams, no cracks, only a continuous curve of ancient rock. The ceiling was low, domed, mirroring the floor. The air here was stiller, almost stagnant, the earthy smell overlaid with a faint, metallic tang, like old coins or forgotten blood. Her gaze swept the room, finding no doors, no other passages, just the smooth, unbroken expanse. It was a space designed for contemplation, for waiting, for holding something precious and secret. A profound silence settled, broken only by the lantern's faint hiss and the frantic thump of her own heart. She had descended into the unknown, and it had led her to this, a small, circular room, a silent witness to a history she couldn't yet comprehend. Utterly alone, yet she felt a powerful, undeniable presence, a palpable sense of age and purpose humming in the very stones around her. This was more than a hidden passage. It was a threshold. The heartstone's glow. The lantern, clutched tight in her trembling hand, cast long, dancing shadows across the smooth, circular walls of the chamber. Ilara's breath hitched, a faint mist in the cool, still air. Her gaze, still adjusting from the dizzying descent, swept the confined space, searching for something, anything. And then she saw it. In the precise center of the room, atop a low, unadorned stone pedestal, rested a single object. It pulsed with a soft, ethereal light, a quiet luminescence that seemed to draw all other shadows into itself. It wasn't blinding, but rather a gentle, steady glow, like the heart of a perfectly ripe starfruit or the inner radiance of a deep-sea creature. As her eyes adjusted fully, Elara realized it was a crystal, not faceted like a jewel, but smooth and ovular, roughly the size of her palm. Its color was an impossible blend of deep emerald and sapphire, shifting and swirling within its depths, as if holding a captured nebula. A primal curiosity, stronger than any fear she'd felt in the tunnel, pulled her forward. Each step echoed in the silence, a stark counterpoint to the thrumming energy emanating from the crystal. The air around it felt different, almost alive, carrying a faint, sweet scent she couldn't quite place. Perhaps ozone, perhaps rich earth after a summer rain, mingled with something ancient and green. She reached the pedestal, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The crystal hummed, a low vibration that resonated in her fingertips even before she made contact. Hesitantly, Elara extended her hand, her fingers hovering inches from its surface. It was cool, yet something about its glow suggested warmth. Her mind screamed caution, memories of dusty old legends and fantastical warnings flashing through her thoughts. But the pull was irresistible, a silent, insistent beckoning. Her fingertips brushed the crystal's smooth, cool surface. A jolt, not of electricity, but of pure, profound warmth, surged through her. It wasn't painful, but exhilarating, like plunging into a sun-drenched spring. The world around her dissolved. The stone chamber, the lantern, even the ache in her shoulders from the climb, all vanished. She was no longer Elara Vance, debt-ridden florist in a forgotten tunnel. She was everywhere. Images exploded in her mind, vivid and overwhelming, yet utterly coherent. She saw towering trees with bark like ancient leather, their leaves a riot of emerald and gold, reaching for a sky that pulsed with an aurora of colors she'd never witnessed. Vines, thick as her arm, snaked through the canopy, dripping with iridescent blossoms that unfurled in slow motion, releasing clouds of fragrant pollen. She heard the rush of unseen rivers, the whisper of wind through boundless fields of sapphire blue grass, and the melodic calls of creatures she couldn't name, yet somehow recognized as profoundly good. She felt the cool, damp earth beneath her bare feet, the rich, fertile soil teeming with life. She saw tiny, luminous fungi painting the forest floor, casting miniature galaxies across fallen logs. Bees the size of her thumb, heavy with golden dust, flitted from bloom to bloom. The air was thick with the scent of damp moss, sweet nectar, and the earthy perfume of growth and decay, all intertwined in a harmonious symphony. It was a world of unparalleled beauty, a primordial Eden, impossibly vibrant and teeming with an exuberant life force. She felt a profound connection to it all, a sense of belonging so intense it brought tears to her eyes. This wasn't just a vision, it was an experience, a memory imprinted directly onto her soul. Then, as suddenly as it began, it receded. The warmth ebbed, the colors faded, the sounds softened, retreating like a tide. Elara gasped, stumbling back from the pedestal, her hand still tingling from the residual energy. She was back in the circular chamber, the lantern casting its familiar, flickering light. The crystal still glowed, but perhaps a fraction less intensely, as if it had shared a part of itself with her. Her heart hammered, not from fear, but from the sheer breathtaking wonder of what she had just witnessed. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from the lingering echoes of that impossible warmth. The scent of ozone and sweet earth still lingered in the air, but now it carried a new meaning, a whisper of a world beyond her comprehension. This wasn't just a rock, it was a window, a repository of ancient life, a heartbeat beneath the earth, and she had just touched its heart. What had Maeve known? What secrets had she guarded beneath the decaying floorboards of the old farmhouse? Elara stared at the glowing crystal, her mind reeling, her perspective forever altered. The farm wasn't just land, it was a gateway, and she, Elara Vance, had just stepped through. Whispers and watchers. The town's murmur, once a comforting backdrop, had sharpened into an insistent thrum, a constant vibration that seemed to follow Elara. Whispers blossomed in the bakery line, briefly wilted in the hardware store, only to reroot at the general store's counter. "Lights at Bramblewood," Mrs. Gable announced, a conspiratorial glint in her eye as she handed Elara her change. "Odd, wouldn't you say? Almost like a pulsing luminescence." Elara forced a tight smile, feigning ignorance. "Could be anything, Mrs. Gable. Old Maeve always did have peculiar tastes in lanterns." But the seeds of suspicion were sown. Others chimed in, each adding a new fantastical detail: a greenish haze, a blue shimmer, a light that seemed to beat with its own internal rhythm. Elara knew precisely what they were glimpsing: the residual energy emanating from the crystal. The thought sent a shiver through her, a startling blend of exhilaration and dread. The world beneath Bramblewood was slowly revealing itself, even to those who only brushed its periphery. Mr. Finch, it seemed, was particularly attuned to the town's growing unease. His visits to the farm had escalated from weekly check-ins to a daily ritual, each more pointed than the last. He'd arrive in his gleaming sedan, a smirk playing on his lips, bearing a thermos of lukewarm coffee or a plate of store-bought cookies. His charm, once a thin veneer, was now visibly cracking, exposing a raw desperation beneath. "Anything intriguing surfaced today, Elara?" he'd inquire, his gaze sweeping over the dilapidated barn, lingering on the recently cleared sections of the property. He'd lean against the porch railing, his eyes sharp, dissecting her every move. "Discovered any old heirlooms? Perhaps a box of Maeve's forgotten curios?" Elara would shrug, always immersed in some mundane task: weeding a neglected flower bed, scrubbing stubborn grime from the porch. "Just dust and spiders, Mr. Finch. You know how these old places are." He'd chuckle, a hollow sound. "Oh, I know, Elara. But sometimes dust can conceal the most surprising things. And spiders, well, they're merely guarding what's already there, aren't they?" His eyes would bore into hers, probing, attempting to decipher her unspoken truths. He seemed to know, or at least suspect, there was something more. One afternoon, as she hauled a wheelbarrow of rubble from the collapsed root cellar, she noticed it. A dark, unfamiliar sedan, conspicuously out of place, parked discreetly at the edge of the old logging road bordering her land. Tinted windows made its interior impenetrable, but a prickling sensation crawled up her neck, the distinct feeling of being watched. She dismissed it initially, a lost tourist perhaps, or someone enjoying the scenic route. But the next day, a different vehicle, a nondescript, muddy utility van, occupied the same spot, its rear doors strategically angled away from the road, as if to obscure its contents. As Elara watched from the kitchen window, a burly figure emerged from the driver's side, scanning the tree line before turning a pair of binoculars toward Bramblewood. His face was shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but the message was stark: she was under surveillance. The pressure intensified over the ensuing days. A fleeting movement in the dense woods along her western boundary. A glint of sunlight off something metallic, quickly withdrawn. The unmistakable sensation of unseen eyes tracking her as she worked, even when no one was visible. It was a subtle, insidious tightening, a slow squeeze around her once peaceful existence. The farm, her former sanctuary, now felt like a stage. Every action, every moment seemed scrutinized. The strange lights, the town's burgeoning gossip, Mr. Finch's increasingly aggressive persistence, and now these silent, watchful men. It all coalesced into a chilling realization. Bramblewood wasn't just a dilapidated farm harboring a hidden secret. It was a prize, and others were closing in. The crystal, her link to a primordial past, was not merely a personal wonder, but a dangerous beacon in a world suddenly teeming with hungry eyes. The developer's interest. A sharp rap, authoritative and abrupt, echoed through Alara's small home, punctuated by the crisp snap of expensive fabric. Her trowel, poised over a flagging begonia, nearly slipped from her grasp. Too early for Mr. Finch's predictable visits, too formal for anyone else. She smeared garden soil onto her apron, a faint tremor running through her fingers as she approached the gnarled oak door. Two figures stood etched against the brutal morning sun. One, a woman, her severe bob framing rimless glasses, clutched a sleek leather briefcase. The other, a man, whose tweed jacket seemed an incongruous splash of gentility in Bramblewood, offered a tight, practiced smile that failed to ignite his eyes. "Miss Vance?" The woman's voice was clipped, precise, and entirely devoid of warmth. "We represent Mr. Alistair Thorne. Might we have a moment of your time?" Alara's brow furrowed. Alistair Thorne. The name alone conjured an empire of gleaming towers and vast tracts of bulldozed earth. He was a leviathan of development, his name synonymous with acquisition and transformation, often to the despair of local conservationists. What interest could he possibly hold in Bramblewood, this forgotten tangle of weeds and collapsing structures? About what? Alara's suspicion laced her voice. The man stepped forward, extending a business card embossed with gold leaf. "Mr. Thorne has expressed an interest in acquiring your property, Miss Vance. We believe this conversation would be best held indoors." Reluctantly, Alara ushered them into her cluttered living room. Its worn furnishings and the faint, earthy scent of potting soil stood in stark contrast to their polished presence. She gestured toward the threadbare sofa, but they remained standing, radiating an air of impatient authority. "To be candid, Miss Vance," the woman began, her briefcase clicking open with a decisive sound, "Mr. Thorne is prepared to make a substantial offer for Bramblewood." She produced a thick document, laying it upon the chipped coffee table. "Our client is quite aware of the property's current condition. Nevertheless, he perceives its latent value." Alara's pulse hammered against her ribs. Latent value? Bramblewood was a financial abyss, a constant echo of her mounting debts. She braced herself for a predatory lowball, a calculated exploitation of her vulnerability. "Mr. Thorne is offering $1 million, the man announced, his voice smooth and placid, as if commenting on the weather. Alara's breath hitched. $1 million for Bramblewood. The sum hung in the air, a surreal, almost ludicrous proposition. It was an amount beyond her wildest imaginings, enough to erase every debt, to embark on a new life unburdened. Her mind reeled. "1 million," she whispered, the word barely audible. But why? The lawyers exchanged a swift, unreadable glance. "Mr. Thorne is a visionary," the woman stated, her tone carefully neutral. "He discerns potential where others might not. He has strategic plans for the region, and Bramblewood holds a critical position." Strategic position. The phrase felt like a cold hand closing around her throat. Bramblewood was isolated, miles from any significant development. It was a forgotten corner of the county. What strategic importance could it possibly possess? The crystal, hot and vibrant against her skin beneath her shirt, seemed to throb in response to her growing unease. "This offer is exceptionally generous, Miss Vance," the man pressed, sensing her hesitation. "Mr. Thorne is a busy individual, and he prefers swift action. We have all the necessary paperwork prepared for your review and signature today." He nudged the document closer, a pen resting beside it like a silent command. The air in the room grew dense, heavy with unspoken expectations. The lawyers' impassive faces, the sheer unexpectedness of the offer, the almost aggressive push for immediate action, it all screamed of a hidden agenda. This wasn't about a dilapidated farm. It was about something concealed, something they desperately coveted. The thought sent a shiver down her spine, chilling her to the core. They knew. They had to know. I need time to consider," Elara finally managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "This is a momentous decision." The woman's lips thinned. "Mr. Thorne's offers are time-sensitive, Miss Vance. He rarely extends them indefinitely. We can afford to wait an hour, no longer." Her eyes, cold and appraising, swept over Elara, lingering for a fraction of a second on the faint bulge beneath her shirt where the crystal rested. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible glance, yet Elara felt its weight, a prickling sensation of being seen, understood, and utterly ensnared. A plea for help. The late afternoon sun cast long, distorted shadows across the overgrown yard as Elara approached the barn. Her conversation with Thorne's lawyers had left a sour taste, a lingering unease that hummed beneath her skin. She tried to dismiss it as paranoia, a natural reaction to corporate sharks, but the memory of the lawyer's subtle acknowledgement of the crystal gnawed at her. Her gaze fell on the barn door, and a cold knot tightened in her stomach. The old, weather-beaten wood was scarred with fresh gouges, splintered near the lock. Someone had tried to force their way in. A frantic, primal fear surged through her, eclipsing the earlier unease. This wasn't just a developer trying to buy land. This was a direct threat, an invasion of her sanctuary. They knew. They knew about the chamber, about the crystal. Heart hammering against her ribs, Elara fumbled with her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed Ben Carter's number. She needed help, and fast. Ben, looking a little rumpled but alert in his uniform, met her at the station, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. The small-town police office felt strangely sterile after the chaos of her barn. "Elara, what's going on?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "You sounded pretty shaken on the phone." She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "Someone tried to break into my barn, Ben. There are fresh marks on the door where they tried to force it open." Ben's expression hardened. "The barn? That old thing? Why would anyone bother with that?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," Elara said, choosing her words carefully. She couldn't tell him about the crystal. Not yet. Not without sounding completely unhinged. "It's been an interesting week. Those developers, Thorne's people, they showed up yesterday with $1 million offer for Bramblewood." Ben whistled low. $1 million? For your place? That's unexpected. Exactly. And they were really pushing for an immediate sale. Aggressive. Elara leaned forward, her voice dropping. "I have a feeling it's not just about the land, Ben. I think there's something else they're after. Something on the property." He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Thorne's got a reputation. He's usually pretty straightforward, just bulldozes whatever's in his way. But a break-in attempt and a high-pressure sale, that's not his usual M. Oh, for a simple land deal. Can you at least come out and take a look at the barn, file a report? She pleaded. Just having a police presence might deter them. Ben nodded. Of course, Alara. I'll swing by first thing in the morning. But if there's more to this, you need to tell me. His gaze was steady, probing. Alara knew he was right, but the words wouldn't come. The crystal, the otherworldly visions. It was too much to unload on a small-town deputy. Not without more proof, more understanding herself. Leaving the station, Alara knew she needed another avenue. Someone with knowledge of local lore. Someone who might understand the strange markings she'd found. Clara Bellwether. Clara's cozy cottage, filled with the scent of lavender and old books, was a comforting contrast to the cold rationality of the police station. Clara, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, was meticulously watering a row of African violets when Alara knocked. "Alara, dear, come in, come in!" What a pleasant surprise! Clara's smile was warm, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. After a brief, carefully edited explanation about her sudden interest in Bramblewood's history, Alara pulled out her phone, displaying the photos of the carvings from the hidden chamber. The intricate symbols, the swirling lines that pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible light in her memory. Clara peered at the screen, her expression shifting from polite interest to genuine fascination. She adjusted her spectacles, leaning closer. My goodness, these are remarkable. Where did you find these? Just in an old part of the barn, Alara hedged. I was clearing out some debris and found them etched into a slab of stone. Clara traced the images with a gnarled finger. These aren't like anything I've seen in local art or historical records. Not exactly Native American, not colonial. They have a very ancient feel, though. Almost primordial. She paused, her eyes narrowing in thought. There are old tales, you know, whispers of a forgotten people long before the first settlers, legends of energies, of the earth breathing. Energies? Alara prompted, her heart quickening. Yes, some of the elders used to talk about certain places, thin places they called them, where the veil between worlds was porous, where things could seep through. They'd speak of powerful stones, too, that held the essence of those places. Clara looked up, her gaze meeting Alara's, a spark of understanding in her eyes. You're not just clearing out debris, are you, dear? You found something, haven't you? Alara's breath hitched. Clara's intuition was unnerving. She still couldn't reveal everything, but Clara's words about thin places and powerful stones resonated deep within her, echoing the profound, unearthly sensations the crystal evoked. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that she was standing on the precipice of something far greater than a simple land dispute. The legend unveiled. Clara Bellwether's gnarled fingers traced the rough charcoal rubbings Alara had laid out on her antique oak table. A delicate scent of lavender and aged paper filled the air of the cozy study. Clara, her spectacles perched on the tip of her nose, hummed a low, contemplative tune as her gaze swept over the intricate patterns. The symbols, alien yet strangely familiar, seemed to hum with a latent energy, even in their two-dimensional representation. Alara watched, a knot of anticipation tightening in her stomach. The faint, persistent warmth emanating from the crystal in her pocket felt more pronounced now, mirroring the tremor in her hands. These are very old, child, Clara murmured, her voice a soft rasp. Older than the oldest trees in the whispering woods, I'd wager. I've seen faint echoes of these in the carvings on the ancient standing stones down by the old mill, but never anything so clear, so complete. She paused, her brow furrowing in thought. They speak of connection, of life's flow, of the earth's deep breath. She pushed the rubbings to one side and reached for a thick, leather-bound tome from a nearby shelf. Its pages crackled with age as she carefully opened it, revealing faded illustrations and handwritten script. My grandmother, bless her memory, kept meticulous records of the old ways, the stories passed down through generations before they were dismissed as mere superstition. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent despite their age, met Alara's. There's a legend, you see, of the Heartstone. They say it was a crystal, not unlike the one you described finding, only far greater. A source of boundless energy, a living pulse for the land itself. Alara felt a jolt of recognition. The crystal, the vibrant primordial world, the warmth spreading through her veins. It all began to coalesce. Clara continued, her voice gaining a storyteller's cadence. The legend tells that in times of great barrenness, when the land withered and the springs ran dry, the Heartstone would be revealed. Its light, they said, could revitalize the soil, coax life from the harshest rock, and bring forth abundance where only desolation had reigned. It was a beacon of hope, a testament to the earth's enduring power. She tapped a finger on a faded drawing in the book, a stylized depiction of a radiating stone surrounded by flourishing flora. The resemblance to the crystal's energy, the very essence of the world Alara had glimpsed, was uncanny. But the legend also warns, Clara's tone shifted, becoming more somber, that such power draws attention, not all of it benevolent. There were those who sought to exploit the Heartstone, to twist its life-giving force for their own selfish gain. To control it was to control the very essence of existence, they believed. Elara's mind raced. Thorn, the insistent offers, the forced entry into her barn. It wasn't just about the land, it was about this, the crystal, the Heartstone. Her grip tightened instinctively on her pocket. The warmth intensified, a comforting thrum against her thigh, as if the crystal itself was acknowledging the truth, a silent confirmation of its identity. The symbols you found, Clara said, her voice pulling Elara back to the present. They are protective wards and also a map of sorts, a guide to its resting place and a warning to those who would disturb it without true reverence. They speak of a thin place where the veil between worlds is weakest, a place where the Heartstone could manifest its full power, or where its essence could be accessed. Elara's breath hitched, the chamber, the slab, the primordial world. It wasn't just a vision, it was a reality, a tangible place accessed through the Heartstone, a place of immense power and profound connection. The notion that she, a struggling florist, had stumbled upon such a monumental secret was both exhilarating and terrifying. The weight of it settled on her shoulders, heavy and demanding. So, you're saying, this crystal, it's the Heartstone, Alara whispered, the words barely audible. Clara met her gaze, a knowing glint in her eyes. Child, the ancient stories are not mere fables. They are echoes of truth. And if what you've told me of your experiences, of the stone's warmth, of the visions, if all that is true, then yes, I believe you have indeed found the Heartstone. And in doing so, you have awoken something truly extraordinary, and incredibly dangerous. The last words hung in the air, a chilling prophecy that resonated with the growing unease in Alara's soul. The quiet life she'd known was irrevocably gone. Standoff at Bramblewood. The rumble started as a low growl, a vibration that hummed through the soles of Alara's worn boots as she tended to a patch of stubborn weeds near the old barn. It intensified quickly, evolving into a guttural roar that shook the very earth beneath Bramblewood. She straightened, her hand instinctively going to the small, smooth stone she kept tucked in her pocket, the one Clara had called the Heartstone. The sky was a pale, indifferent blue, but a shadow was rapidly unfurling across her fields. Around the bend of the gravel road, a monstrous yellow machine appeared, its articulated arms swinging ponderously, a giant, hungry maw of metal. Behind it, another, then a third, flanked by a convoy of trucks spewing diesel fumes. A wave of men, uniformed in hard hats and high-vis vests, spilled out, moving with an aggressive, proprietary air. They were heading straight for her property line, past the private property sign that now seemed laughably fragile. A stout man with a clipboard and a booming voice detached himself from the group, striding directly towards Alara. He wore a crisp, expensive-looking polo shirt beneath his safety vest, and his eyes, when they met hers, held a chilling lack of warmth. "Miss Vance," he announced, his voice devoid of courtesy. "We're here to begin the demolition." Alara felt a cold dread constrict her chest, but she pushed it down. "Demolition? On what grounds? I haven't agreed to anything." The man gave a dismissive flick of his hand. "Mr. Thorne informs me you verbally accepted his offer last week. Consider this us taking possession." Her jaw tightened. "Mr. Thorne is mistaken. I explicitly declined his offer. There was no agreement, verbal or otherwise." The memory of the unsettling meeting, the lawyer's subtle threats, flashed in her mind. They were trying to strong-arm her. "Look, lady," the man said, his tone hardening, "we have a schedule to keep. This property is now Thorne Developments. We advise you to gather your personal belongings and vacate the premises immediately." He gestured impatiently towards the encroaching machinery, which had begun to position itself dangerously close to her ancient oak. A flicker of defiance ignited within Alara. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about the land, the crystal, the primal world Clara had spoken of, and the unseen forces that sought to exploit it. "I'm not going anywhere," she stated, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in her hands. "This is my home. You have no right." The man scoffed, exchanging an amused glance with one of his crew. "No right? We have the backing of the law, Miss Vance, and a signed purchase agreement. You're holding up progress." "There is no signed agreement," Alara insisted, her eyes darting to the nearest bulldozer, its engine idling ominously. "I never signed anything. Show me proof." Before the man could respond, the whine of a different engine cut through the air. A battered news van, emblazoned with the logo of the local station, skidded to a halt on the road. A woman with a microphone, followed by a cameraman, jumped out, their faces alight with professional curiosity. Deputy Carter, standing by the van, gave Alara a quick, reassuring nod. The developer's lead man's face paled, his composure cracking. "What in the—" The reporter, a sharp-featured woman named Brenda, thrust her microphone towards Alara. "Ms. Vance, we understand there's a dispute here at Bramblewood. Thorne Development claims you've sold your property, yet you appear to be resisting their attempts to begin work. Can you tell us what's happening?" Alara drew a deep breath, the cold stone in her pocket feeling warmer now, almost pulsating. "They're lying," she declared, her voice ringing clear over the din of the idling bulldozers. "I never sold Bramblewood. They're trying to unlawfully seize my land. This is my home, and I won't let them take it." The developer's man, now flustered, tried to interject, but Brenda turned her microphone on him. "Sir, what is your response to Miss Vance's accusation of unlawful seizure?" He stammered, fumbling for words, the confident bluster draining from his face. The cameras were rolling, capturing every uncomfortable twitch, every defensive gesture. Elara stood her ground, arms crossed, facing down the formidable machines and the powerful men who controlled them. Bramblewood wasn't just dirt and decaying wood. It was a battleground, and she was ready to fight. The land awakens. Elara's voice, though still tinged with the tremor of adrenaline, resonated with a newfound steel as she addressed the news cameras. The setting sun cast long, dramatic shadows across the chaotic scene. The bulldozers hulking like defeated beasts, the demolition crew looking sullen and exposed, and Deputy Carter, a silent, watchful sentinel. She clutched the heartstone, now openly displayed, its facets catching the fading light. "This land," Elara began, her gaze sweeping from the parched earth to the inquisitive faces of the reporters. "Bramblewood is more than just property. It's alive. And this," she held up the crystal, its light a soft internal glow against her palm. "This is its heart, a heart that Mr. Thorne tried to rip out, believing it worthless." A murmur rippled through the small crowd. Elara took a breath, the cool air filling her lungs, steadying her. "They claim I sold it. They claim I gave up on it. But they don't understand. This isn't just dirt and weeds. This is a place of immense power, a thin place where the veil between worlds is permeable." She paused, searching for the right words, knowing how outlandish it sounded. "This crystal, the Heartstone, it's not just a pretty rock. It connects to the very essence of life, to the spirit of this land." One reporter, a young woman with a skeptical glint in her eye, interjected, "Are you saying this rock is making your land special, Miss Vance?" Elara met her gaze, unwavering. "I'm saying it is special, and this crystal is its voice, its pulse. It's what allowed me to see what was truly here, what was hidden, and what Mr. Thorne intends to do, to pave over it, to build his sterile structures, would destroy not just a piece of nature, but something ancient, something vital." Her grip on the Heartstone tightened, a protective instinct surging through her. "I intend to restore Bramblewood, to let its true nature flourish, and I will not allow anyone to take it from me. Not now, not ever." As Elara spoke these words, a remarkable shift occurred. The Heartstone, which had been emitting a gentle luminescence, pulsed. It wasn't a flicker, but a deep, resonant throb, like a giant heart beating. The light intensified, blooming from within the crystal, casting a blinding white glow that momentarily eclipsed the setting sun. Faces in the crowd squinted, hands shielding eyes. A collective gasp escaped their lips. From the corner of Elara's eye, she saw it first. The old, long dry well, a desolate moor in the earth that hadn't seen water in decades, began to stir. A faint gurgling sound rose from its depths, growing louder, more insistent. Then, with a sudden, joyful surge, clear, cool water bubbled up, overflowing the stone lip, cascading down the moss-covered sides. It spilled onto the parched ground, creating instant rivulets that snaked through the cracked earth. But the miracle didn't stop there. Where the water touched, an impossible transformation began. Tiny, emerald green shoots, impossibly vibrant, erupted from the barren soil. They unfurled with astonishing speed, not just in patches, but in long, verdant ribbons trailing the water's path. Within seconds, the dusty ochre landscape around the well was replaced by a tapestry of fresh, dewy growth. Small wildflowers, their petals unfurling in a riot of blues, yellows, and purples, pushed through the new grass, their colours startling against the fading light. The air, which had been thick with dust and the smell of diesel, now carried the sweet, earthy scent of damp soil and burgeoning life. The demolition crew stood frozen, their mouths agape. Deputy Carter, usually unflappable, stared at the blossoming ground with an expression of utter disbelief. The reporters, initially stunned into silence, now scrambled for their cameras, their incredulity warring with the undeniable evidence unfolding before their eyes. Alara felt the heartstone thrumming in her hand, a powerful, benevolent vibration that resonated deep within her bones. It was as if the land itself had awakened, roused by her promise, emboldened by her defiance. Bramblewood was fighting back, and it was doing so with a spectacular, undeniable display of its true, potent magic. Thorn had wanted to bury this land. Instead, it was blooming. A new beginning. The footage went viral before the evening news even aired. A local reporter, initially dispatched for a puff piece on a struggling florist's inherited farm, found herself delivering a live report from what she described as a miracle in the making. The camera panned across Bramblewood, showcasing the vibrant wildflowers that now carpeted the previously barren land, the once dry well overflowing with crystal clear water, and the ancient oak, its branches now laden with verdant leaves, humming with an almost visible energy. Birds, absent for decades, flitted between newly blossomed branches, their songs a joyful chorus. Elora, standing amidst the verdant explosion, looked less like a woman on the brink of financial ruin and more like a high priestess of nature. The initial disbelief quickly gave way to wonder, then a burgeoning sense of local pride. Mr. Thorne's carefully constructed legal claims, once formidable, began to crumble under the weight of public opinion and Elara's unwavering resolve. His lawyers, accustomed to steamrolling small landowners, found themselves facing a united front. You can't just bulldoze a natural wonder, one particularly impassioned caller declared on a local radio show, echoing the sentiments of hundreds. Petitions circulated online, demanding Bramblewood be declared a protected natural site. The sheer speed of the transformation defied logical explanation, lending an almost mythical quality to the land that even the most cynical couldn't entirely dismiss. Deputy Ben Carter, badge gleaming, stood by the newly gushing well, a thoughtful expression on his face. He'd seen the before. He'd driven past Bramblewood countless times, a desolate patch he'd always associated with local legends of bad luck and barren soil. Now, the air itself felt different, crisp and sweet, carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming petals. He'd witnessed Alara's declaration, the pulsing heartstone, and the instantaneous burst of life. His official report had been a masterpiece of carefully chosen words, skirting the miraculous while emphasizing the undeniable and sudden ecological shift. Unexplained, rapid vegetation growth and water resurgence, he'd written, knowing full well what he'd truly seen. His job was to uphold the law, and something told him Bramblewood, in its new glory, needed protection. Clara Bellwether, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, gently traced the outline of a particularly vibrant bluebell. She'd arrived at Bramblewood with a collection of ancient texts and a knowing glint in her eyes. "The old tales speak of such places," she murmured to Elara, her voice a soft rustle like dry leaves. "Places where the veil is thin, where the earth's pulse beats strongest." She'd confirmed what Elara already felt in her bones. The Heartstone was genuine, a living conduit to something ancient and powerful. "It binds you, child, as much as you bind it," Clara had explained, gesturing to the thriving landscape. "Its well-being is now yours, and yours its." Elara, with Clara's guidance and Ben's quiet support, began to establish Bramblewood as a sanctuary, not just for nature, but for people. Local artists set up easels, capturing the vibrant new beauty. Children, initially hesitant, soon giggled as they chased butterflies through meadows that hadn't existed weeks prior. The overflow from the well, now a small meandering stream, was rumoured to possess healing properties. People began bringing their ailing pets, their tired bones, their troubled minds, to sit by its banks. The Heartstone remained hidden, protected by a cleverly disguised chamber and Elara's fierce watchfulness, but its subtle influence permeated the land, a gentle hum of renewal that touched everyone who stepped foot on Bramblewood. Elara, no longer just a struggling florist, became its steward, its voice. She organized volunteers to maintain the new trails, planted more native species suggested by Clara, and held quiet gatherings where people could simply be in the revitalized space. Mr. Thorne, for his part, made a final, desperate attempt to reclaim his supposed prize. His lawyers cited contractual obligations, eminent domain, anything they could dredge up. But the tide had turned. The community, rallied by Elara's quiet strength and the undeniable magic of Bramblewood, stood firm. Deputy Carter, armed with zoning ordinances and environmental protection laws he'd meticulously researched, found every loophole, every technicality to block Thorne. The developer's plans for a luxury resort now seemed absurd, a crude imposition on a place that clearly held a deeper, more sacred value. One sunny afternoon, as Elara watched a group of elderly women practicing gentle yoga amidst the wildflowers, a profound sense of peace settled over her. The financial ruin that had loomed so large now seemed distant, replaced by a different kind of wealth. She had protected Bramblewood, and in doing so, it had protected her, transforming her life in ways she could never have imagined. The Heartstone, safely tucked away, pulsed faintly in her mind, a silent promise of growth and enduring magic, a new beginning not just for the land, but for everyone who found solace within its vibrant embrace. But even in this newfound tranquility, Elara knew the secret of the Heartstone was a fragile flame, and there would always be those who sought to extinguish it for their own gain. The battle was won, for now, but the war for Bramblewood's true nature had only just begun.